I'm glad you found your way here. Welcome to our panel, Power Shift or Power Drain, Perspectives on the Hydropower to Hydrogen Connection in Africa. The event will be in English and French, and we do have translation. If you didn't grab a headphone, you can do so in the back. The channels are there. And just one more housekeeping point, we will be taking some pictures that we will also use on social media. If you don't want to be in the pictures, please show us now. The photographers will. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so my name is Elisa Kadel. I work for Countercurrent or Gegenströmung in German. We work on the social and ecological effects of large dams. And we're very happy to have this event tonight in cooperation with Klimaallianz Deutschland, the German Council on Foreign Relations, Misereor, Forum Umwelt und Entwicklung, and International Rivers, and also especially from the Democratic Republic of Congo, our partners Femmes Solidaires, Solidarité des Femmes sur le fleuve Congo, la Coalition des organisations de la société civile pour le suivi des réformes et l'action publique, and the Centre Congolais pour le droit du développement durable. Yeah, we're here today to talk about the Grand Inga Dam project in the DRC and its relation to hydrogen imports to Germany. Hydrogen, as you will know, I think is a huge topic in Germany right now. And yeah, at least in environmentalist circles, there's a consensus that fossil-based hydrogen or gray or blue hydrogen is not a good long-term solution because of the climate effects. But today we will discuss the green hydrogen and yeah, discuss whether green hydrogen in some cases is a real or a false solution for climate justice. Yeah, and as I mentioned today, especially we will look at the example of the Grand Inga project in the DRC, which is a hydropower to hydrogen project. Yeah, to start us off, we will watch a video which will explain some of the issues. And after that, I will introduce our speakers. Can you start the...
What is hydro to hydrogen? Hydro to hydrogen schemes use hydropower to convert water to hydrogen through electrolysis. The electricity produced by dams in off-peak times or during strong river flows is stored in the form of hydrogen. Later, when the peak energy is needed, the hydrogen is converted to electricity. Producing hydrogen through electrolysis requires large quantities of water, which is readily accessible at hydropower dam sites. Despite the expense and inefficiency of hydrogen, corporations and industry lobby groups like the International Hydropower Association are promoting hydropower as a key fuel source for hydrogen production, promising a new era of clean, renewable energy. Is hydro to hydrogen green energy? It is a common misperception that because hydro...
Sorry, we seem to have a technical issue.
Hydrogen. Corporations and industry lobby groups like the International Hydropower Association are promoting hydropower as a key fuel source for hydrogen production, promising a new era of clean, renewable energy. Is hydro to hydrogen green energy? It is a common misperception that because hydroelectric plants do not burn fossil fuels, they do not emit pollution or greenhouse gases. But rotting vegetation trapped in dam reservoirs can produce greenhouse gases. When a dam reservoir fills with water, that water covers organic matter like dead plants, trees, fields, and farmland. As that organic matter breaks down, it releases carbon dioxide and methane, the two major greenhouse gases associated with climate change. During the first 10 to 20 years after construction, the greenhouse gas emissions from a hydropower reservoir can equal that of a fossil fuel-powered power plant. Hydropower depends on the availability of water in flowing rivers. As climate change affects the water cycle, both droughts and floods are becoming more common and more severe. Big dams are very inflexible in dealing with extreme weather. Droughts make dams less reliable for electricity production, and floods make dams unsafe. Sub-Saharan Africa already suffers from the worst water stress in the world, and climate change is making it worse. In this time of growing water stress, dams reduce water quality and dam reservoirs will dry up forests and wetlands, flood productive land, destroy fisheries, and displace communities. All of this decreases food security and makes it harder for people to adapt to climate change. Construction of the Inga 1 and Inga 2 dams in the 1970s and 80s, for example, forcibly evicted thousands of people in the Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC. The project deprived communities of their lands and livelihoods and left them deeply impoverished and vulnerable to the changing climate.
Batu oyo bazalaki na temps wana et puis batu wana babokanaki ti lelo biso tozalingana pa na kanki chasa na Inga. Donc biso nde toza ba victime, biso nde bazo délocaliser na kati ya Inga et puis na bamboka Lugwaku, Lundu et Kilengo. Mboka na ngai propre Kilengo. Donc je suis ayant droit.
Nous ne pouvons pas être délocalisés, soit nous remplacer une terre quelque part. Nous nous adressons au gouvernement de considérer nos déclarations fait que, à partir de nous et nos futurs de cette famille, continuent à vivre au sein de leur terre et de leurs ancêtres.
Regardless, the hydropower industry and its supporters are eager for hydro to hydrogen projects to be recognized as green hydrogen. Concerns around the economic viability and negative social and environmental impacts of large dams has caused a major decline in the hydropower industry in recent years. Hydropower proponents hope to use the hype around hydrogen to revive their dying industry. The Grand Inga Dam. An example of the danger of renewed interest in hydropower is the proposed Grand Inga Dam in the DRC. The Grand Inga Dam complex would cost over $80 billion and take decades to complete. The World Bank, the African Development Bank, and other funders who had initially shown interest in the project have pulled out due to concerns around its serious social and environmental impacts and the massive investment required. In June of 2021, however, the DRC government awarded the Australian mining company Fortescue Future Industries, FFI, the right to develop the Inga project as a hydropower-to-hydrogen scheme. At over 40 gigawatts, the dam would be twice the size of the largest hydropower project in the world. The express purpose of reviving this massive project is to produce green hydrogen and fertilizers for export to European markets. Congolese civil society groups are strongly opposed to the project. They are concerned that their government awarded the contract to FFI without a procurement process, and that tens of thousands of citizens would lose their homes. The project would affect the Congo rainforest, a vast area so valuable for capturing, removing, and storing carbon dioxide that scientists have called it the world's second lungs after the Amazon rainforest. The Congo River also empties water and sediment into one of the largest carbon sinks in the world, the Congo Plume in the Atlantic Ocean. A massive dam on the Congo River would cause the collapse of the Congo Plume, with potentially serious global consequences. Hydro-to-hydrogen schemes give dam builders a chance to rebrand hydropower as green energy. This would enable them to access billions of dollars in government subsidies and incentives, and help to revive an out-of-date industry. Hydro to hydrogen is not zero carbon, however. It is a biodiversity and climate crime and presents a false solution to the climate crisis. To make matters worse, hydro to hydrogen schemes are not designed to provide energy to local people. The Inga project, as a case in point, would do nothing to serve the 90% of Congolese who lack electricity. Rather, the energy produced would be exclusively for export to foreign markets. In summary, hydro to hydrogen schemes threaten to extend a lifeline to destructive dam projects while diverting resources away from proven solutions for local energy access and climate sustainability. The way forward. Before governments commit public resources to hydropower to hydrogen schemes, they must carefully consider the social and environmental impacts and do a cost-benefit analysis of alternatives. The construction costs of solar and wind energy projects are 2 to 3 times cheaper than hydropower dams, and using renewable energy directly is cheaper and more efficient than using hydrogen produced from renewable energy. Rather than providing subsidies for hydropower to hydrogen schemes for the export of energy, governments should prioritize energy access and climate justice for their citizens. This includes improving the efficiency of existing energy systems and developing affordable and accessible energy options such as community-based microhydro and decentralized solar and wind. This will pave the way to a truly sustainable and just energy transformation.
Okay, so in that video, we already heard 2 voices from the communities. And we are lucky to also have a member of the community here with us today. Angelique Morzolo, she lives in Inga, and her community is under threat to be displaced if these new dams were built. And she is active in an organization called Solidarity of Women on the Congo River, who is working to organize rural women and local communities in the Congo Basin. Welcome, Angelique, please come to the front. So Angelique will speak in Lingala, and Salome is here to translate to English for us. Angelique, can you tell us a little bit about your current situation in the community and what you expect regarding the new dams that are being planned?
Parce que makambo ezoleka na Inga mingi na mboka fo information ezalaka mpona information yango nde ebombaka mboka mpo lelo soki boza informe te bokolamuka boye esi eyindaki nango kote mosusu bato babandi kokima bambangu mpona ni boza sous informe.
So first of all, the community are not informed. So the information is the key. So without the information, we are lost. And you can wake up one day in the morning and they tell you that there is war or people have died and you don't know what's going on.
Ba makambo ebele lekaka ya ba projet na mboka na biso toyeba te surtout biso ba communauté locale. Bamona biso lokola toza inutile neti toza na likamba koloba te na makambo oyo ezoleka na mabele na biso.
So the other thing is they do not consider us because we are local communities. So when these big projects are made, we are not informed and they don't even consider to come and talk to us and to consult us.
Tolandi histoire kuna Inga de tozwa eloko monte bakoko na biso bazo eloko te, toza na mai te, toza na courant te, toza na nzela te. voire même ba place oyo kutu tosalelaka pêche ezosala susu malamu te.
So we did give our land to build Inga 1 and Inga 2, but we don't have roads, we don't have schools, we don't have hospitals, we have nothing. And even now we are living the consequences because the river does not produce enough fish for us to go and sell.
Ekole yango nde eza vie ya mutu paske tango bana bazotanga nde bakozala malamu. Siko toza na ekole ya malonga te. Mais biso topesi mabele na biso pona projet, pona ba projet munene Inga 1 Inga 2 yango wana. Mais moye bana batanga malamu eza te toza na ba ekole ya malonga te.
So we all know that schooling is very important. And when you go to school, you learn a lot and you become someone. But we don't even have schools and our children does not go to school. They cannot afford to pay for the schooling because we don't have school. And if they have to go to school, it's very far away and it's very expensive. So they don't even consider us and it's like for them, we don't exist.
Bon, pona question na nini tokokai kozelela pona vraiment question wana na makamba boye tokokai kozelela nini parce que Inga 1 Inga 2 bakoko na biso pe bapesaka bango ba promesse baloba bakotonga bandaku bakotonga ba école bakotonga boye mais esalema pete sikoyo pona projet ya boye tokozelela nini projet moko oyo toza na information ya malonga te. Donc, projet zamo lili to kukai kozelela nini.
So our expectation, what can be our expectation? We don't have any expectation because with 1 and 2, they did promise our grandfathers and mothers that we'll have better houses, we'll have schools, we'll have hospitals, but we did not get it. So coming with this big project that we don't even know, they don't even talk to us about it. So we don't have any expectations with that big project.
Na yango, lokola pays na biso eza munene, ekozala malamu, ba développer ba énergie, ba développer ba projet wana na ba place ya mike, ba grand barrage ba tonga mike, oyo ekozala bénéfique na peuple congolais, pe biso ba communauté.
So for me, it would be better to have the small dams, build the small dams, so it can be benefit for the population of Congo and for the community instead of having this big project that will not benefit the population of Congo.
Projet eza clarté. Lelo bazoloba na biso, bango kutu bazokoka te koyebisa biso ke projet eza na délocalisation. Grâce ya ba international oyo ba kompanyaka biso na national bango nde batambolaka bazoka ba information par-ci par-là bango nde ba informaka biso nde tozoyeba ke projet eza na délocalisation mais mokolo moko te gouvernement na biso aya ayebisa biso ke ndenge eza boye bako délocaliser bino kutu na ba réunion soko lobi yango balobi te makambo wana na yebisi bino yango c'est pas vrai.
So for us to even have information that we have today, the international NGOs and the local NGOs that have come with information and telling us that we'll be displaced, because when we go even to ask the government if we'll be displaced, they tell us, no, you will not be displaced. Who's telling you this thing of you being displaced? You will not being displaced.
Tomona FFI ayaka wana ayaka mona azaka kana masolo na bakonzi peut-être ako sangisa mwa groupe moko bosko nga eloko ona sepelaka nango te okomona likambo moko eza likolo bazui mwa ba chef de quartier obolamba biloko bato baleka babanda kolia biloko wana donc ozomona information moko ya clarté.
So when FFI comes, they come, but they don't want to talk to us because even when they go, they talk to government and it's only them, and they don't like want to. They don't want to talk to us or to ask us questions. So it's really in the dark.
Merci. Na yango, en tout cas, biso ba projet oyo ekomemela biso tozomona déjà liwa parce que ndenge eza boye na Inga de makuku futila ye ndenge aza wana lelo aza sans terre azaka so na droit te ya kopesa meme bato place basala bilanga na mboka na ye soki alinga pesa moto place SNEL Société nationale ya SNEL wana azoko intercale ye ekomi ba place na ye me ba place wana ti lelo ba vente wana place esaleme yebana te.
So Makuku Futila, it's a land where they built Inga 1 and Inga 2. So they gave the land, now they have no rights to that land. And with living in Congo Central, when you have a land, you are respected. Without a land, you are not respected. So now they did not get anything with all the promises. It's like now they have no respect because they have no land.
Ok, merci beaucoup. En tout cas, na suki awa, ba projet wana oyo ekoboma ba vi na biso tozala d'accord nango te.
Thank you so much. I think you've listened to me. So the project that will come to destroy our lives, please, we don't want it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Angelique, for sharing. And I would now like to welcome our panel. So I'm happy to introduce four great panelists tonight. So right next to me is Emmanuel Musuyu. He's a permanent secretary at the Coalition des organisations de la société civile pour le suivi des réformes et de l'action publique, a Congolese NGO. He's an engineer in environment and sanitation management and has expertise in policy monitoring and advocacy, particularly on water and renewable energy, and has contributed to several campaigns in these areas, including campaigns around Grand Inga. Then next to Emmanuel, we have Salome Lolo. She's the executive director of an organization called Femmes Solidaires that works to accompany and support women of the communities of Inga with regard to the Grand Inga project. Next to Salome is Loyal Campo. He's a research fellow at the German Council for Foreign Relations on International Energy and Resource Politics. Before that, he completed policy fellowships at Woodrow Wilson Center for Scholars and at the United States House Select Committee on the Climate Crisis. His previous work has assessed the geopolitics of the global energy transition and green industry. Loyal has a master's degree in international energy from Sciences Po Paris, and before academia, he worked in the Canadian energy sector. And finally, we have Christiane Averbeck. She is the executive director of Klimaallianz Deutschland, a broad civil society alliance for climate action. Previously, she worked in development projects in Ghana, Uganda, and Zimbabwe. And she also researched pollution in the North Sea and supported the German Council for Sustainable Development, among many other things. She holds a PhD in biology and is also a member of the National Hydrogen Council. So before we start with the questions, I do have some more introductions of people who are not on the panel, but also in the room and part of the delegation. So we have Eric Kasongo, who is a lawyer working on environmental and human rights issues in Congo, and executive director of the Congolese Center for Sustainable Development Law. And we also have Sizio Mota and Bonnie Barclay, who are working for the international NGO International Rivers that is dedicated to protecting rivers and river communities. So warm welcome to our panel. finally we can start. So my first question, Emmanuel, is to you. We heard about the Grand Inga project in the video. Please share your perspective what this project would mean for the DRC. Would it help to solve some local challenges, or would it rather pose more problems?
Alors, merci beaucoup. Bonjour à tout le monde ou bonsoir. I'm very happy to be with you here. And I think I will speak in French because of good understand for everybody. Alors, pour la question que vous avez posée sur Inga, je pense qu'on a tous suivi la vidéo qui, n'est-ce pas, parle de cette grande vision que nous appelons autrement illusion de la RDC, de développer un grand projet qui pourra devenir bien évidemment le plus grand projet hydroélectrique au monde, avec une capacité de plus de 40 000 mégawatts pour ce grand barrage. Et l'idée derrière, c'est qu'on le produit pour, n'est-ce pas, on produit cette énergie pour produire de l'hydrogène qui sera vendu aux pays en Occident, ce qui n'est pas forcément une bonne chose parce que finalement en RDC déjà, il n'y a que 9% des populations qui ont accès à l'énergie. Comment on va produire de l'électricité pour vendre à l'étranger, sans compter tout le problème environnementaux, tout le problème sociaux de ces grands barrages. Donc, pour la RDC, bien évidemment, à cette question-là, Grand Inga, finalement, signifie ou ramène une peur à la population congolaise. Comme vous l'avez écouté, la communauté qui dit, il y a eu Inga 1, Inga 2 qui existent, on a délocalisé des personnes qui ont perdu leurs terres. Jusqu'aujourd'hui, ils n'ont jamais été indemnisés. On a vu la dette de la RDC accroître à cause de l'arrivée de ces grands barrages et on a vu plusieurs autres impacts parce que Angélique, son mari est pêcheur, elle-même, elle vend du poisson. Aujourd'hui, elle est dans la pauvreté encore plus accentuée. Pourquoi? Parce que l'impact du fleuve Congo est visible. Il y a plusieurs espèces de poissons qui n'existent plus dans le fleuve. Donc, un très grand projet comme celui-là, n'est-ce pas, pourra amener beaucoup plus de pleurs que du bonheur qu'on nous fait voir parce que déjà, n'est-ce pas, les grandes entreprises qui visent ces grands projets sont plutôt, n'est-ce pas, ne visent que le côté économique et s'en passent du côté environnemental, du côté social des projets. L'autre volet de la question, n'est-ce pas, parler de la qui contribuerait, n'est-ce pas, est-ce que ce projet contribuerait aux problèmes locaux? Non, Inga ne pourra pas forcément contribuer aux problèmes locaux. Pourquoi? Parce qu'il est question de produire un grand barrage dans le Congo central et pour que toute la RDC puisse bénéficier de ça, il faut construire des grands réseaux, des grandes lignes électriques qui vont traverser plusieurs provinces et ça nécessite beaucoup d'argent. Juste une ligne qui devra être construite du Congo central vers le Katanga où on produit les cobaltes et les cuivres, cette ligne-là devra coûter plus de 4 milliards de dollars. Et c'est juste une ligne, mais maintenant, on ne peut pas connecter l'ensemble du pays avec ce projet-là. C'est comme ça que les solutions sont telles que la RDC a un potentiel de plus de 110 000 mégawatts répartis à travers le pays, avec une possibilité de développer au moins 800 sites hydroélectriques, n'est-ce pas, décentralisés. Et une fois on est dans un secteur décentralisé d'électrification, la population aura accès à l'électricité, l'économie au niveau local sera développée et des activités seront, n'est-ce pas, aussi développées dans le sens de favoriser ces développements qui partent du milieu local pour le milieu, n'est-ce pas, pour le milieu urbain. Donc, c'est un peu ce que nous pourrons dire en termes, n'est-ce pas, de ce que nous voyons du projet Grand Inga. OK, désolé, j'étais trop vite. Oui, donc c'est ce que nous pouvons attendre de ce projet Grand Inga. Et vous comprendrez que c'est vraiment une illusion, alors qu'il y a des solutions locaux qui coûteront moins pour le pays, qui coûteront moins pour l'environnement, qui coûteront, n'est-ce pas, moins aussi pour le social, parce qu'avec des micro-barrages, on n'a pas besoin de délocaliser plus de 40 000 personnes, alors que c'est ça le plan avec Inga. Au-delà de tout le problème de communication, d'information que les gens ont comme souci. Voilà, je voudrais m'arrêter là pour permettre, n'est-ce pas, au développement du panel. Mais merci pour votre attention. Thank you.
Okay, we will do our best to speak a bit slower. Thank you, Emmanuel. Loyal, you've done a lot of research on the Grand Inga project and on the DRC. So I would like to hear your perspective. Do you agree with Emmanuel's assessment, or do you have a different view, and why? Just have to be close to it. Yeah.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. I really appreciate the chance to be here. I agree with certain proponents of Emmanuel's assessment, but I would also like to say that in general, there are certain parts of the video that was displayed that is either misrepresentational, misinformation, or somewhat problematic, because hydropower is essentially one of the greenest energy technologies we have. Without hydropower, if you look at any decarbonization scenario without hydropower, it doesn't happen. So I think it's important to put things in perspective. Yes, if there's emissions built from building a dam, that's a bit of an issue for a 10, 20-year window. But hydropower dams can run for 100-year or 200 years, right? The Hoover Dam was built over 100 years ago, still producing power. There were hydro dams built by Nikola Tesla that are in the 1800s that are still running and delivering power. So it's important to reject hydropower and if the conditions are problematic, but you also need to give it the contextual facts that kind of structure the conversation. I really do appreciate Emmanuel mentioning the issues of governance, though, but this isn't inherently a rejection of hydropower projects itself. It's more of a rejection of mismanaged hydropower projects. So in case of the Inga Dam, one of the bigger issues is what happens with all of the money that's invested here. I mean, the Grand Inga project is about $80 billion. If you look at the whole scale of the thing, that is almost double the GDP of the DRC. If there was mismanagement or corruption or anything lost there, then you could have fiscal problems for the country for decades. So it is a real big issue if this is not done properly. So I think whether or not it can actually help, I think you need to disassociate the hydropower parts of it and the hydrogen parts of it. So, okay, if you want to say use all of the energy locally, if you don't have the grid infrastructure to do so, then what do you do with the sheer volume of power? 40 gigawatts of hydropower capacity, if that was running at 100% capacity factor, you'd have about 350 terawatt hours of power year round. That's about 70% of the power consumed annually within Germany. According to the IEA, if you have about 50 kilowatt hours to 100 kilowatt hours consumed with an individual household, that is essentially enough power to give a modern energy lifestyle. There's about 590 million people living in sub-Saharan Africa that are in energy poverty. You calculate that up from kilowatt hours up to terawatt hours, the Grand Inga Dam alone could bring the vast majority out of those people out of energy poverty. It's not to say that the energy potential is the only reason for the project. You just need to put it in scale, because this is a project that could generally revolutionize the entire continent if it was done properly. The biggest issue is what does it actually look like on the ground? The reference to Inga 1 and Inga 2 are really, really good points, because again, the debt issues of the projects cause fiscal instability in the DRC, and also the power grid itself wasn't able to even absorb that much power. And then if you don't have the power grid to actually distribute it, then you have a bunch of stranded power. And the nominal idea that plugging hydrogen into this making anything better is not really, it's not a blanket solution. There's only 0.7 gigawatt capacity of electrolyzers deployed globally as of last year, and a 3 or 4 gigawatt hydropower capacity would essentially be what, 8 or 7, 9 times more than global electrolyzer capacity. So there's really no really viable way to actually export it in terms of hydrogen, at least within the next decade. So I don't know. I think I've answered the question a bit more, but sorry if I needed to clarify some things to give some context for hydropower, because I think that facts are also important.
Okay, thank you, Loyal, for your view. Salome and also Emmanuel, I would like to give you a chance to react to what you just heard. And maybe you can also speak a bit about your assessment, particularly of the hydrogen plants, because the ideas for this dam have been around for a long time, and initially it was planned without hydrogen, and now there's this new idea. So maybe you can, speak a little bit about this.
Yeah, as we can know that now the development of the construction of this big dam now, it's for it to produce hydrogen so it can be exported outside, all of it. So the DRC will not benefit in anything. So it changes the perspective because it will be the first one, like the DRC will be the first country to produce hydrogen from hydropower, and it will be exported. So going back to the whole experience, like we've been talking about the first dam and the second one, it did not benefit the population or the communities. Yes, it did help, but it helped them. It helped them. It helped electrify or help the minerals. Yeah, minerals. Yeah, the transformation of minerals, but it did not help the population, because up to now the population are in the dark. Like Emmanuel was saying, like you have less than 9% of the population living in the dark. So bringing this big project that has never been done elsewhere, going to start it in Congo just for the sake of to export it, it's like the neo-colonialism again that is coming back, because we are still living it now in 2023, having the raw material that we have to export from the DRC to go to other countries. And now it's the energy turn that we have also to do the same thing, to export the hydrogen, the green hydrogen, to export it to other countries. So for me, it would be good if we have the equal benefit, like you come to invest, when they are coming to invest, like Emmanuel was saying, we have potentials that we can build small dams that can help the population of DRC, can electrify the population of DRC. I know some of you have never been to the DRC, because if you go there, we live in the dark. So it's so a shame, like being in 2023, still living in the dark, not have electricity, and to hear that we have this huge potential, but we need to build it so for the sake to export them outside. Emmanuel?
Peut-être pour ajouter quelque chose, de par ce qui a été dit, je fournirai un effort d'être vraiment, je parlerai lentement cette fois-là. Donc, merci beaucoup pour la parole et surtout l'intervention de tout à l'heure. Il est vrai qu'il y a bien évidemment deux problèmes. Il y a le problème d'hydroélectricité d'une part et le problème d'hydrogène. Ici, l'hydroélectricité, tous on connaît que c'est une énergie renouvelable, bien évidemment, mais la grande hydroélectricité, c'est une énergie très problématique. Et déjà, plusieurs études, comme il a été dit dans la vidéo, démontrent aujourd'hui que l'hydroélectricité à grande échelle contribue à la production de gaz à effet de serre qui polluent au fait notre planète et qui nous causent des sérieux problèmes. D'ailleurs, aujourd'hui, ce qui se passe par exemple aux États-Unis, il y a au fait une sorte de certificats qui sont donnés aux projets énergétiques renouvelables. La micro-hydroélectricité aux États-Unis bénéficie de ces genres de certificats pour prouver que c'est une énergie propre. Mais la grande hydroélectricité n'en bénéficie plus à cause justement de cette évolution récente, n'est-ce pas, de par les études qui ont été menées. Parlant de l'hydrogène, qu'est-ce qui nous intéresse? On ne dit pas que l'hydrogène est une mauvaise chose en soi, mais il s'agit de quel hydrogène? On parle de l'hydrogène vert. L'hydrogène vert ça provient de quelle source d'énergie? Parce qu'une hydrogène verte qui provient d'un grand barrage, qui cause d'énormes problèmes sur n'est-ce pas, l'environnement, qui cause d'énormes problèmes sur l'économie des pays du Sud, qui pose d'énormes problèmes, n'est-ce pas, sur le social des populations. Est-ce qu'on va continuer à appeler cet hydrogène verte? Je ne pense pas. Donc, c'est comme ça que nous disons, même la vidéo l'a dit tout à l'heure, c'est qu'il y a cette catégorisation à faire pour permettre à ce que l'on soit dans le respect des droits humains, dans le respect des standards aussi, dans les deux cas où on pense à l'hydroélectricité, comme dans le cas où on pense à l'hydrogène pour l'Occident qui en a besoin. Mais après, se pose aussi toute la question, n'est-ce pas, de la transition énergétique juste. Est-ce que c'est juste pendant qu'on a 100% par exemple d'accès à l'électricité, d'aller prendre de l'énergie dans un pays qui n'en a pas pour satisfaire encore ce besoin? C'est vrai que les besoins en énergie sont énormes. Donc, c'est toutes ces questions-là qui sont posées. Inga, il peut être développé, oui, mais pour qui? Comment et pourquoi? C'est toutes ces questions-là qui nous poussent justement aujourd'hui à questionner forcément cette technologie-là, ce besoin-là, et surtout l'avenir qui, n'est-ce pas, a besoin de trouver des solutions idéales autour de la problématique énergétique qui se pose aujourd'hui.
Thank you both. I do want to include Christiana in the conversation, but Loyal, since it was such opposing views to yours, if you want to, if you have a quick reaction to what you just heard, you'll have a chance.
Yeah, I would like to thank you, and I'll try my best to speak slower. I think it's important to recognize the terms of global capacities and exportability of green hydrogen. The DRC doesn't have any hydrogen facilities at the moment, and global electrolyzers is 0.7 gigawatt globally, everywhere in the world. If you have 40 gigawatts of hydropower from the Grand Inga Dam, you would need to multiply global capacity for electrolyzers, what, like 30, 40, 50 times to even do that? There's no possible way that all of the electricity coming from the Inga Dam would go exported out in the form of hydrogen. It's not physically possible. I think it's important to distinguish here that exporting hydrogen in certain amount of volumes is not inherently problematic as long as the rents are returned to the communities that are being removed or the people that are locally employed. The problem is issue of governance here. It's not a matter of it's not really a matter of where the energy is going and how it's being used. It's a matter of who's benefiting from it, right? I think one of the biggest issues with any of the colonial debate is that all of the resources are being extracted and they're being paid on pennies on the dollar. And that's one of the bigger issues as far as I'm concerned. Any green hydrogen if it was exported, then okay, then pay a premium for it. And all of that money goes back into the local economy to build roads and to build grid infrastructure to evacuate the rest of the power throughout the rest of the country. I don't think that's inherently problematic, but you need to distinguish that there's no physical way to possibly export that much power out in the form of hydrogen. It's not physically possible. You can't liquefy it. It's not possible. It's really not possible. If there was that much energy available there, the DRC would have the cheapest cost of power in the planet, especially at that port. Industry would move there overnight because it would make sense to operate there. Yeah. So I think it's important to recognize that the issue at this point ends up being your connection infrastructure, that you can't actually move the power around the country. And that ends up being another conversation about how viable is dispersed solar? How viable is this alternative? Hydropower is extremely important as baseload capacity to provide reliable power so you don't have rolling blackouts. Solar power is great, but you have blackouts with it. Can't have solar at night. I think these are important conversations to delineate that hydropower has its problems, especially in this context. But I really think that this is kind of a misrepresentation at certain points.
Okay. I think we will come back to this and you will get a chance to react as well. But first, I would like to also include the German perspective on hydrogen in this debate. Because Germany wants to import a lot of hydrogen and you know all about it. Can you give us a very brief overview of why the government is making all these plans and what exactly is being planned? And in particular, what role are social and ecological safeguards or standards playing in the current debate? And do you think the standards being discussed now will be sufficient to address issues like, for example, we just heard about in the Grand Inga project?
Yeah, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to be here to represent the German situation. But I just want to make clear that I'm in the German Council of Hydrogen Council. Is it? Ja, ich höre das auch. Hallo? Kann ich widersprechen? Ich glaube, jetzt ist besser, ne? Okay. I'm a representative of a German NGO, so I'm not government. Yeah, I think this is very important because in the council are 26 members and 2 members are from German NGOs. And we are rather on your side than on the side of certain activities of, what is planned now from the German side. And what we always try in our work in the council to make sure that the perspectives of the local interests of the local people are respected. So, for example, as part of our work was to develop sustainability criteria. And the main impulse for this sustainability criteria came from the German NGOs, because we don't have an economic interest, but we want to make sure that although we see the necessity, of defossilize our economies, which we see, which is very, very important, that we want to make sure that on the local levels, all the activities are accepted and discussed with the local communities. So coming back to the Germany and why we are so much interested in hydrogen. I mean, as you know, we are a highly industrialized country. We are power hungry and energy hungry. and especially those sectors that cannot be electrified have to use hydrogen to be decarbonized, which are, for example, the steel industry, the chemistry industry, and for example, also certain parts of the mobility sector. And for example, when we want to decarbonize our flights and big ships and so on, for those where we can't use batteries, we need to have hydrogen. And as you can imagine, we need a lot of hydrogen. And we realized already that in Germany, only 20 to 30% of our demand can be produced in Europe or in Germany. So therefore, we have to import hydrogen. And what the German government is doing and German companies are doing, that they are contacting or in, try to develop cooperations with different countries. And as I understood, is although it was at the beginning an idea also to invest in Congo into the Inga power project, that the Germans I think for good reasons said, no, we are not interested. So therefore, I'm very happy that also maybe a little bit our lobby work, because actually we always lobbied against using Inga for hydrogen production for Germany, that it helped or worked. Now we have this other investor, and I think that is now the tricky part. I mean, it is one single billionaire who is investing now in this project. And I think there it becomes a little bit more complicated. I think that it's mainly your government and I think also your local authorities also who have to make sure that Forrester cannot do what he wants to do. I mean, I single out that name now because I know he's a big investor also in Australia. He's a big investor now also in Great Britain. And I don't know if you've heard about it, but that Forrester is now, I think he said to the British government, I want to get out of our certain investments in Britain because you are actually not doing what I think you should do. So therefore, I think this is also a bit tricky when one single rich man has the opportunity to decide, what to do. Maybe you can clarify a little bit on that. I don't know all the details, but that's also what I find when it comes to this whole governance issue, a bit problematic. Then one issue I also want to mention, you said neocolonialism, yeah? Now, when we argue that we hear from you that this is neo-colonial, yeah, then we hear that African leaders say, don't interfere into our business when it comes to oil and gas production, yeah, because that is neo-colonial. So at the end of the day, it becomes tricky where this word neo-colonial is always used when it comes to, working together and, to develop plans for the future of all of us. I really want to highlight that this word of neocolonialism is used in different ways, and that it's a challenge.
Thank you. Salome and Emmanuel, back to you. You've heard lots of different things now from both Loyal and Christiane, and I think you looked like you wanted to react to some of that.
Non, mais merci beaucoup. Je pense que les échanges sont tellement intéressants. Et déjà par rapport aux précédents commentaires, je pense que je suis très d'accord avec vous qu'il y a d'abord un problème de gouvernance qu'il faut régler. Et donc, pour le projet Grand Inga, déjà ici, on faisait allusion, n'est-ce pas, au problème de consultation, on faisait allusion au problème de corruption, n'est-ce pas, au problème même de mobilisation de ressources internes pour qu'on arrive à développer un tel projet. Effectivement, les issues de gouvernance se présentent comme un sérieux blocage pour même le développement du pays de façon globale. Pour dire que le projet Grand Inga, il n'y a pas que du côté environnemental où ça ne marche pas, mais aussi la gouvernance interne au niveau du pays. Mais le problème aussi par rapport à certains points de vue, c'est que c'est ce qui est d'ailleurs dommage de mon point de vue. Beaucoup d'acteurs ne pensent souvent qu'aux aspects positifs sur le plan économique. On gagne quoi en développant un grand projet comme Inga? Déjà, si on voit ça sur le point de vue économique simplement, c'est vrai que déjà pour Fortescue, Future Industrie, il dit que voilà, je peux mobiliser 26 milliards pour construire ce grand barrage. Et le 26 milliards, c'est vrai qu'il va aller contracter ça auprès des banques, auprès de plusieurs de ses partenaires. Mais après, qui va gagner concrètement et qui va gagner? Parce que déjà, pour votre information, il y a un contrat qui a été signé entre Fortescue et le gouvernement congolais où il est dit clairement que la RDC ne pourra gagner dans ce contrat-là que 5 à 15%, n'est-ce pas, de l'investissement, sur l'investissement de Fortescue. Au-delà de ça, Fortescue aura une concession d'au moins 30 ans qui sera renouvelable, où il va exploiter ses ressources, il va gagner de l'argent, il va rembourser certainement ses dettes, il sera exonéré presque complètement pendant toute cette période-là, mais aussi en signant ces contrats de concession avec l'opérateur ou le développeur qui est Fortescue, la RDC va perdre complètement sa légitimité ou sa souveraineté sur le site d'Inga. C'est-à-dire que pour accéder à ce site, même une autorité congolaise devra passer ou demander l'autorisation de Fortescue parce que complètement, ça sera à lui sur toutes ces années. Vous vous rendez compte qu'on met en avant les aspects économiques, mais finalement, ça nous amène où et qui gagne dans un tel projet. Donc, c'est quand même des aspects, c'est vrai, on veut bien avoir 40 000 mégawatts qui peut correspondre, comme vous le dites, à la capacité de consommation annuelle de l'Allemagne. Mais je pense qu'il y a des alternatives qu'il faut qu'on puisse promouvoir pour qu'on arrive bien évidemment à apporter des solutions concrètes. Et peut-être un petit commentaire sur tout à l'heure la réflexion par rapport au nouveau colonialisme et ancien. Ce sont justement des mots qui s'expliquent. C'est vrai, les dirigeants africains dans la globalité, malheureusement, on le constate, ils sont aussi en train de se battre pour leurs propres intérêts. Parce que vous vous imaginez le gouvernement comme celui de la RDC qui met qui met en bloc 27, voilà, qui veut vendre 27 blocs pétroliers et gaziers. Et malheureusement, je n'avais pas préparé le MAPS pour que vous puissiez vous situer. Les 27 blocs sont répartis à travers les 26 provinces de la RDC. Donc, il y a de ces blocs qui connectent plusieurs provinces en même temps. Et la majorité de ces blocs se trouvent dans des aires protégées, ça se trouve dans des parcs nationaux, ça se trouve sur les terres des communautés, dans des forêts communautaires, sur les terres des communautés, parce que plus de 60% de la population vit en milieu rural. Et en milieu rural, c'est l'agriculture, c'est la pêche, c'est l'élevage. Et c'est là qu'on fera cette exploitation. On veut de l'argent, mais pour qui et pourquoi? Donc, finalement, je pense que c'est aussi un faux fouillant pour certains dirigeants quand ils parlent du nouveau colonialisme, parce qu'il arrive qu'on leur mette devant un fait accompli pour leur démontrer que c'est carrément des impacts irréversibles que vous allez créer sur la population. Et du coup, vu qu'ils veulent avancer, c'est pourquoi ils avancent des fois ces arguments. Mais après, pour revenir à ce que disait ma collègue, la colonialisation, c'est quoi? Colonialisme, excusez-moi, c'est qu'effectivement, on veut imposer d'une manière ou d'une autre, encore une fois de plus, au gouvernement, parce que finalement, la RDC n'a pas 26 milliards pour développer le grand Inga. Par contre, les grandes puissances, récemment, on vient de lire un article où on dit que la Banque mondiale et bien d'autres veulent revenir. Quand ils viennent avec leur argent, si l'Allemagne donne son argent, certainement, il veut son intérêt dedans. Et quand on produit de l'énergie pour ne pas bénéficier aux communautés qui souffrent déjà, en tout cas, c'est comme ça qu'on considère que c'est encore une forme de colonialisation qu'il ne faudrait pas que nous, acteurs, puissions soutenir. Voilà.
Yeah, I just wanna. Okay, yeah. Yeah, I just want to add just a little bit because he has like saying everything. So when, for example, you are talking about Andrew Forrest, like telling the government of UK, if you cannot do this, then I'm pulling out. So imagine a country like DRC, we have nothing. So yeah, when they are coming, it's like either you do that or you don't. So today we were talking about development and we were asking ourselves like, as Africa, like sub-Saharan Africans, do we know or do we define what is development in our country? Can we define that? Can our president define what is the real development? Because if we cannot be able to define the development in our own country, then it will be very difficult. As Lloyd was saying, like the governments, yes, the governance is also inside there because they don't know. We don't know what is development. Do we have to copy the West so we can tell ourselves that this is development? So when those big projects are coming, we tell ourselves, yeah, we are going to be like Germany, for example. So let's just go with it. We don't have anything to give, because if you can see, even in the project that we are having with FFI, DRC will not give anything apart from the land. So that means that we have no say, that we should have a say, but we have no say because we don't give anything. And in this world nowadays, it's a win-win. Like, I'm putting $26 billion in something, I have to have something. I cannot put just $26 billion and have nothing. So that is the difficulty that we are having.
Thank you. Well, you now heard a lot from the other people on the panel about the issues that they see with this project. So I would like to hear your views, since you, from what I gather, you are a proponent overall of the projects. How do you think these issues can be addressed that have been raised?
Thank you. I'd like to say that I'm not an
inherently supportive of the project. I think that it's important to just delineate that there are certain pros and cons of it. And I would say that in general, you should be supportive of developing large scale hydro in a country like the DRC, especially if 40 gigawatts is untapped. Again, the issue here keeps coming back to who is the investor and who's getting all of the rents from it, and what kind of public procurement process was there when there wasn't one. This goes back down to a politician giving away large amounts of natural resources to a foreign investor and getting almost nothing in return outside of lining their own pockets. You can see this again in Ziki. Okay, sorry.
Can you maybe take the microphone?
Yeah, sure. You can see this again in lithium and cobalt and all of these things. So a perfect example is a large cobalt mine in southeastern DRC. There's a large Chinese company owning mineral rights there, and I think their operations were shut down by the Congolese government more recently, but there was a few years ago where the small scale artisanal miners were encroaching upon this mineral claim, and the military was deployed. Yeah. This is not a problem about mining. This is a problem about the state infrastructure and the state apparatus reinforcing colonial structures. Yeah. So I think that's important to distinguish, because being against hydropower is relatively naive and a bit misleading. Being against hydropower where the resources are being extracted and exploited and people aren't being consulted, I think that that's a fair game. Yeah. Because if you look at the World Bank's criteria to evaluate a good hydropower project, local consultation is part of it. Local repayment for relocation is part of it. A perfect example that happened in China, there was several billion, or there was like $10-20 million set aside for relocation packages, and all of that money was gone for corruption. Yeah. So, I mean, even in the case of China, where you have huge hydropower projects where you go missing if you do things like that. Corruption is again an issue, because hydropower projects are multi-billion-dollar in their scale, and they take a very long time. They're very capital intensive. So the governance risks are enormous. So in this case, I don't support hydropower of this specific project under these circumstances in the DRC, because the possibility of corruption and all of the misgovernance issues are enormous. As our wonderful guest here mentioned, they made all of these promises decades ago, but none of it was delivered. That's not inherently a problem with the hydropower dams themselves. That's a problem with the people managing it. That's a problem with people not returning the investment into the civil infrastructure that they promised. That's failed and missed promises. That's failed and missed goals. And I think that that's important to clarify, because vilifying hydropower project as all of these things is not really productive. You're miscategorizing certain elements of it. It's not to, and I definitely think that this billionaire tycoon owning a big hydropower project is deeply problematic. I mean, you have the same kind of structures of massive mineral rights throughout the Congo, and there's a long history of that. There's I can't remember the name of the guy, but there's lots of books written about this one tycoon who knew political leaders and essentially got billions of dollars of mineral concessions. And I think like less than 10% or less than 5% of it was back to the country. Yeah. So I mean, this is an issue of governance. This isn't even neo-colonial in its structure, because the government, the person who's there, is actually enabling and facilitating it. Yeah, and I mean, it's not a foreign government usually involved in this. It's usually a tycoon who has really good political connections, who can grease some palms and get in there. And the problem there is that they're not held accountable. And I mean, yeah, it's as you said, it's how do you negotiate with this, where they basically say, like, we invest or we walk away. I mean, it's a hard game to play. But when you go back to the economic terms, if you can make a situation where a foreign government is investing and they get a reasonable return on investment, that's fair, not, this ridiculous thing where 100% of the profits are going to the foreign company. Okay, because it can't be philanthropy either. It can't be. It has to be mutually beneficial, where the local people benefit, the local country benefits, but also the foreign capital has an incentive to go there. And in this case, you can have a long string of economic development out of it. But the problem is that if any of this portion is captured, then you have really big issues, especially with large scale projects like this. And I think that, sorry if I'm talking too long, but I really think it's important to clarify some of these things, because they're all important issues, but they're all very, very specific. They require very specific circumstances and contextual anecdotes that make things vastly different.
Christiane, you want to add something to that?
Actually, I have a question for you, because what we discussed also among civil society organizations, as we see that there is a demand for hydrogen, and this is in the interest sort of all of us, you know, because we have to combat the climate crisis. And I mean, what we did in the National Council, we developed this sustainability criteria, you know, where we said that once German government is implementing such projects in different parts of the world, that certain demands or certain things have to be respected and fulfilled. So that means that human rights, for example, you know, all the issues now of involving local communities, that is needed. That, for example, also we said in our recommendations that it is necessary that you know, you have to see that there's this issue of energy poverty in those regions, so that when you develop such projects, that you have in mind how to support the local communities, how to have enough energy themselves. Also, we said that one could consider, when developing projects like that, I mean, maybe not like your project, but other projects, that one has to consider that water scarcity can be an issue. So therefore, even that has to be put in mind when you develop this project, and make sure that also access to water is there for the local communities. So all this sort of, these are certain criteria, and some of the developers of such projects have already sort of included such criteria. It's not yet properly implemented, I would say, but we think that as we see that the development of the green hydrogen market is necessary, that something like that is important when you want to make sure that these projects are not bound to fail. Because, you know, with your project, I think it's obvious that it is bound to fail. So, I mean, do you think that there could be, under certain circumstances, I don't know how you can be involved in all these projects, but that something like that could be possible? Maybe not such something like a huge dam, but you said smaller infrastructure or so on. Maybe you can share your ideas on that. Maybe you have some ideas on that. At least I would be very much interested.
Can you repeat the last question? So the question is, if we have an idea about the smaller dams.
Yeah, whether you have maybe some ideas how, if are there any circumstances under which you can imagine to develop something like that, like a hydrogen project? Or is it out of discussion in your area? And maybe when you hear what I've said, could you imagine that under certain circumstances, people are willing, you know, to produce with renewable energy, hydrogen, even in parts of the world like Africa? Is it too complicated? I'm
No,
not
no, it's
sure.
not.
Is it clear?
Yeah, it's clear.
Yes. Je pense que c'est... Non, c'est pas compliqué. Je pense que, effectivement, d'abord, je suis content de discuter avec vous parce que vous êtes, n'est-ce pas, dans le consul, vous représentez la société civile. Et là, vous avez quand même touché quelques aspects qui nous intéressent les plus. Parce que notre préoccupation ici, c'est de dire, on l'a dit, on le répète, qu'on n'est pas contre le projet d'hydrogène. On n'est pas contre forcément l'hydroélectricité, mais il y a ce type de projet qui entre en ligne de compte, qui crée des problèmes. On a parlé des grands barrages. On est tous d'accord que les grands barrages, au-delà du fait que ça nous donne beaucoup d'énergie, au-delà du fait que c'est beaucoup d'opportunités économiques, ça nous crée aussi beaucoup de dommages en termes d'impact, n'est-ce pas? Et donc, ici, je disais, j'abordais justement, j'ai commencé à intervenir en disant que ça nous intéressait le plus parce que finalement, dans vos réflexions au niveau du consul, vous essayez d'intégrer au fait tous ces aspects liés au respect des droits de l'homme au niveau communautaire, c'est rassurer que les communautés ont accès à l'eau, ont accès à l'électricité. Effectivement, s'il y a, par exemple, vraiment un texte qui aborde ces aspects-là, on a besoin de ça parce qu'une de nos demandes, déjà autour de cette table, c'est de voir au niveau de l'Allemagne, quelle est la stratégie de l'hydrogène? Comment cette stratégie de l'hydrogène aborde les aspects que vous avez évoqués, que nous sommes en train d'évoquer? Comment est-ce que la stratégie sur l'hydrogène en Allemagne définit clairement ce que nous devons appeler une hydrogène verte? Elle vient d'où? Elle est comment? Comment est-ce qu'on prend en compte ces aspects-là? Finalement, déjà au niveau de la stratégie, si elle est intégrée ou si elle est abordée encore de façon plus accrue, c'est une très bonne chose. Reste de voir comment est-ce qu'au niveau local, cela est aussi intégré. Parce que finalement, on peut avoir des textes, mais on a des partenaires qui ne respectent pas ces textes-là. Est-ce qu'il y a des mécanismes de contrôle, de contraintes pour faire en sorte que le partenaire, par exemple, qui produise de l'hydrogène en dehors de l'Allemagne, sont contraints à respecter tel standard de sorte que tout le monde se retrouve au mieux. Parce que finalement, il y a plusieurs projets. Tout à l'heure, aujourd'hui et hier, on était dans des discussions, par exemple, avec le KfW, mais aussi le ministère du Développement, où on leur a dit clairement, il y a des standards, certes, mais par exemple, un projet comme Ruzizi, où on voit que les communautés, les populations n'ont pas accès à l'information. Alors que l'Allemagne a financé, il y a une société de projet qui est sur place, mais qui ne respecte pas certains standards. Tout ça, ce sont des questions justement qu'il faut aborder. Après, par rapport à votre question, oui, au fait, l'hydrogène peut être produit, mais comment on finance un projet dans un pays qui n'a pas d'électricité pour prendre cette énergie en question, le renvoyer quelque part? Parce qu'on parlait des FFI tout à l'heure. FFI dit il va produire l'ensemble du potentiel énergétique de Inga pour construire une industrie verte, parce que c'est comme ça qu'ils appellent ça, de l'industrie verte. À Mwanda, Mwanda, c'est au fait dans la partie ouest de la RDC, au bord de l'océan. Ils vont ériger quelques infrastructures comme leur port à eau profonde là-bas. Ils vont construire un aérodrome dans ce coin. Ils vont construire une ligne de transmission qui quittera Inga spécialement pour ce coin, qui prendra toute cette énergie là-bas. Et dans l'industrie verte, c'est là qu'on produit de l'hydrogène, de l'ammoniac et d'autres intrants. Vous voyez, OK. Est-ce que cela est bénéfique pour ce pays-là qui est promoteur d'un tel projet? Ça peut être en RDC, ça peut être partout en Afrique. Est-ce qu'on tient compte de ces aspects-là où effectivement le pays hôte bénéficie d'une manière ou d'une autre, c'est soit en termes d'accès à l'électricité ou même en termes de revenus clairs, c'est vrai. Et après, toutes les questions de gouvernance se posent. Donc, c'est un peu ça la problématique que nous mettons sur la table pour dire qu'on n'est pas contre l'hydrogène, on n'est pas forcément contre l'hydroélectricité parce que nous disons ici et nous le répétons que de notre point de vue, la RDC a besoin de développer un système décentralisé. Rassurez-vous, Inga 1, Inga 2 produit près de 2200 MW le potentiel, mais ce qui est produit, c'est autour de 1000, la capacité actuelle, c'est autour de 1500, quelque chose comme ça. Et cette énergie passe sur les toits des communautés pour traverser les provinces de Kinshasa, les provinces du Bandundu, le Kasaï, pour atteindre, n'est-ce pas, Kolwezi. Ce n'est pas bénéfique, ce n'est pas ce que la RDC a besoin, alors que dans l'entretemps, à côté de ces communautés, il y a des potentiels qui peuvent être développés, déjà de façon autonome, comme en termes de mini-réseaux, chose qui peut permettre le développement à partir de la base. Finalement, on peut penser à des grands projets qui visent les autres si on veut. Mais pourquoi pas penser à des projets Inga qui effectivement créent des opportunités d'investissement au niveau de la RDC? Ce sont des choses que nous mettons sur la table. Des fois, malheureusement, avec tout ce problème, des fois, nos dirigeants ne nous écoutent pas. Ce sont là les vrais problèmes. Inga n'a pas de vision aujourd'hui. Ça veut dire quoi? Ça veut dire que quand un développeur qui a de moyens arrive, il prend Inga et il l'amène dans sa direction. Alors que au niveau de la RDC, on devait avoir une vision fixe pour dire que nous, en tant que pays, voilà ce que nous voulons de notre projet. Par contre, on se laisse influencer par les grands pays, les grands investisseurs, comme vous le disiez tout à l'heure, un individu qui est Fortescue, qui a sa vision de devenir le leader mondial de l'hydrogène. C'est sa vision à lui, n'est-ce pas? Et il veut profiter des ressources qui sont disponibles pour aller. Donc, c'est un peu ce que je peux dire par rapport à votre question. J'espère que j'ai essayé de répondre à cela.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we are slowly but surely running out of time. But I do have, well, two different final questions. One is for Lol and Christiana, and the other one is for Emmanuel and Salome. So I'll start with you, Lol and Christiana. From your view, what do you think the role of German actors, the government, German industry, should be or can be to ensure that in green hydrogen projects abroad, human rights and ecological standards are being respected?
I would say it's very simple. Always, when such projects will be developed, these sustainability criteria have to be respected. It should be part and parcel of each and every project. I mean, that is actually what we are asking for as Climate Alliance Germany in our role in the Green Hydrogen Council or in the Hydrogen Council. And actually the Hydrogen Council agreed to it. The question is always how it will be implemented and how the different investors also will respect these criteria. And moreover, I think it is very important that this should be not only organized on German level or so, that German companies are respecting these criteria, so it should be worldwide. It should be maybe, I don't know, IRENA or so, different, this international energy agency should develop criteria for each and every hydrogen project. And then so that everybody can sort of look at it, you know, are these, and there should be sort of something like a monitoring of whether these criteria are respected or not. And we thought of, I don't know if that is realistic, but it could be that there is an independent body or so, so having a look at it, whether the different companies are really respecting these criteria, so that you are not left alone with one big investor. And if I may say so, with the politicians in your country who benefit from the big money they get, but you are not getting because you are directly affected by the project.
I would tend to agree with my colleague here. I think that German NGOs could probably play a important role, because I think there is an important factor of because monitoring on a global level is challenging. You definitely require local intermediaries to function on that. So I think capacity building up and general awareness raising of standards and how to enforce due diligence and how to audit whether or not standards and best practices are being met and are being followed. I know in the case of mining, there's like the OECD due diligence requirements and all of this other kind of stuff. So I would generally tend to agree Germany could, as a government, or even industries in this case, can come together, especially if you're the off taker of that hydrogen, you can require for the producer to meet specific standards and you can kind of audit them. This requires having much more of a responsible sourcing mentality throughout the supply chain. You can see this kind of thing beginning to happen in mineral supply chains like cobalt, but in other cases, practices from this kind of supply chain ESG stuff being enforced in hydrogen would make sense. But again, the problem is whether or not it's good enough and fast enough and all of that stuff and the gaps and compliance issues. It ends up being kind of a never-ending problem.
Challenge.
Politically correct term for it.
Thank you. Okay, and the final question to the two of you. What is your vision for the economic model and for energy policy in the DRC? And how, in that vision, what are the relations of the DRC to Europe, to the rest of the world?
Okay, merci beaucoup pour la question. Et peut-être un petit commentaire, entre parenthèses, par rapport à ce qu'on disait tout à l'heure sur deux fois la corruption sur nos politiciens. Je voudrais juste donner, faire cette parenthèse-là pour dire, Fortescue vient en RDC, Fortescue, c'est-à-dire Fortescue Future Industry, l'entreprise de Forest, Andrew. Il vient en RDC, il veut développer le projet Inga, il prend de contact avec un conseiller puissant du chef de l'État. Et le conseiller, c'est lui qui fait d'office le commissionnaire pour l'amener et manager tout ce qu'il faut pour, n'est-ce pas, qu'il gagne le marché. Mais déjà, vous pouvez vous imaginer que quelqu'un qui est en compétition bénéficie de toutes les faveurs possibles, au point même que le conseiller l'a logé dans son cabinet. Pendant près d'une année, l'entreprise fonctionnait dans le cabinet du conseiller du chef de l'État avec tous les pots de vin et tous les avantages possibles. Ils étaient intouchables. Donc ça fait justement, ça nous fait croire de ces liens qui peuvent exister entre certaines autorités de façon individuelle qui, voilà, vont se battre coûte que coûte pour qu'un tel projet arrive parce que finalement, il a peut-être, même c'est 1%, si tu as 1% sur 26 milliards, comprenez ce que ça représente, n'est-ce pas? Donc, c'est un peu ça. Après, quelle est donc notre vision par rapport au modèle économique de la RDC par rapport à ces secteurs-là? C'est un peu comme on disait tout à l'heure. Le modèle économique d'aller dans le grand barrage a prouvé beaucoup de limites pour la RDC. Le premier barrage Inga 1 et le deuxième barrage Inga 2, le premier a été inauguré en 1972 et le deuxième, c'était en 82. Et vous allez vous rendre compte que c'est vrai qu'une grande partie de Kinshasa a de l'électricité. Il y a peut-être 2 ou 3 villes autres qui en ont, mais le pays ne s'est pas développé forcément parce que les autres coins du pays n'ont pas eu accès à l'électricité. Ce qui montre au fait les limites, même si on veut, je suis d'accord que voilà, ça produit beaucoup plus d'énergie en même temps. Mais au-delà de tout ça, c'est que le pays a besoin d'énergie aujourd'hui, même s'il faut transformer les cobalt, il faut faire tout ce qu'on veut. On a plus de 110 000 mégawatts, mais c'est vrai que près de 40% est érigé sur le site d'Inga, mais plus de 60% est réparti à travers le pays avec une possibilité de construire très rapidement parce qu'on a de cas actuellement des projets comme dans le parc autour du parc de Virunga, un projet qui a coûté presque 600 millions. En moins de temps, moins de 3 ans, des projets sont opérationnels et la ville de Goma aujourd'hui bénéficie de l'énergie, voit sa capacité d'accès à l'énergie accroître. Et je peux vous assurer que malgré qu'on a l'image de la guerre dans cette partie du pays, mais la population qui est là vit. Et vous pouvez arriver sur place et vous allez voir le développement économique, la petite entreprise, comment est-ce qu'elle se développe et la vie. Les gens préfèrent vivre là-bas qu'aller ailleurs. Vous pouvez vous rendre compte de ce modèle économique plutôt décentralisé qui est plutôt favorable avec tous ces avantages que dans moins de temps, on a de l'électricité. Avec un coût moindre, on a de l'électricité. On faisait même un calcul récemment pour dire, voilà, avec 26 milliards, on peut construire plus de 18, même plus de 20 microcentrales et qui coûterait peut-être 12 milliards et n'atteindrait pas ce 26 milliards. Donc, pour dire que pour nous, le modèle économique idéal, pour le cas de la RDC aujourd'hui, c'est un secteur décentralisé qui permet le développement à partir de la base. Après, qu'est-ce que nous souhaitons voir avec le monde allemand et autres? Parce que je suis sûr que certaines personnes se posent aussi la question, quel est le lien entre, n'est-ce pas, l'Allemagne et le projet Grand Inga? Finalement, il n'est peut-être pas très visible. Mais récemment, n'est-ce pas, il y a l'entreprise Evagor, je ne sais pas si vous connaissez, qui est une entreprise allemande qui avait signé un contrat, un MOU avec le gouvernement qui voulait développer le projet Inga. Mais c'est vrai que le MOU court encore parce qu'il n'a pas été annulé et quelque chose n'est pas encore très clair à ce côté-là. Au-delà des Evagor, il y a l'entreprise Dutch Bahn qui venait de signer un contrat avec Fortescue, avec l'idée que si Fortescue commence à produire de l'hydrogène et tout son travail autour de Inga, et ils vont travailler sur le côté logistique et dans la chaîne des valeurs pour, n'est-ce pas, aider à ce que cette énergie, qui est donc l'hydrogène, puisse atteindre l'Europe. Et vous allez vous rendre compte que si l'hydrogène est produit à partir des Inga, le marché, c'est l'Europe. C'est peut-être l'Allemagne et d'autres pays. Donc, ce que nous souhaitons, c'est que, voilà, qu'on travaille avec vous dans la mesure où on suit le développement, n'est-ce pas, de tout le projet d'hydrogène, surtout en RDC et en Afrique, qu'on se rassure que les standards, comme on le disait tout à l'heure, sont bien définis et que ces standards sont aussi suivis sur terrain avec un monitoring plutôt engagé, de sorte que voilà, les choses se passent dans le respect des droits humains, que les choses se passent surtout dans l'optique que voilà, toutes les populations gagnent par rapport à ce développement-là. Je pense que c'est quelque chose sur lequel nous tenons et nous voulons voir cette solidarité avec l'Allemagne, surtout dans la mesure où on veut, n'est-ce pas, faire ce monitoring sur la stratégie de l'hydrogène de l'Allemagne et même de l'Union européenne qui aura besoin, n'est-ce pas, de cette énergie.
Yeah, I think I'll just.
Okay, thank you. Salome, your vision.
Yeah, I'll just add a little because again, he has explained everything. As we all know that Germany needs green hydrogen. So by saying that Germany is in need with green hydrogen, it's like the market is open and every businessman is trying his best to produce and to sell it. Like Germany will be the first client to go. As you are the chair council, yeah. So it will be good, you'll be our advocacy and see if the strategy is well implemented, even in other countries, because we know other countries also are producing green hydrogen in Africa. So if you can help also other countries and including even Congo, when that subject comes up, and say that this one, no, we cannot. Let's respect the human rights and see what it can be done. And then, okay, yeah, I think, yeah, that's all.
Thank you so much to our panel. And yeah, thank you also to the audience. We have not so much time for questions, but I think we can take a few if you have any questions.
I don't know how there are still people who are proponents of big hydro. I'll just give examples from my region. With droughts, there's a dam called Cahora Bassa in Mozambique, which is operating and has very low water levels, sorry, at about 34% because of droughts in Southern Africa. We recently read in the New York Times that there was a dam in Libya where 5,000 people died because of flooding, because there was just too much rain and the dam wall collapsed. So considering the fact that, climate change is here and is upon us and it's impacting us, I feel that dams are not a very good investment. Probably one of the worst. Dams are being decommissioned in many places. They're literally an archaic technology, in my view. You will see that the Inga Dam, for example, is going to be or would be double the size of China Three Gorges, like double the size. And the displacements from China Three Gorges were about 1.3 million. And this dam is going to be far bigger. So as much as the displacements are not calculated in those figures, it just doesn't make sense. And I don't think it's only a governance issue. It's an environmental issue. It's a climate issue. It's a cost issue. In the kind of interest rate environment that we're in right now, I don't know who's got money to invest in big hydro. We have the president of South Africa, last time he was in France, begging Europe to please invest in Inga. We have the president of the DRC going to New York, begging for investments, crying that the World Bank needs to get back, that the Chinese need to invest in this economy. I don't know who has got that kind of money. When we were speaking to German decision makers, just the last meeting we had before coming here, they were saying the figures just don't make sense. So it's a human rights issue as well. And, yeah, that's my position, and that's my view.
Yes, thank you so much for your view. I think I can just build upon this. According to the Living Planet Index of WWF that has been recently published, we have decline in freshwater dependent species of wildlife by 83% over the last 50 years. And dam building and also hydropower dam building is one of the components that contribute to this factor. And it doesn't matter so much if we build just big dams or a huge lot of small dams. They all contribute to the decline of biodiversity. That is true for the migratory fish, for instance, also, but also because the dams are changing the rivers into still waters. And so all the species that are dependent on running water will decline by dam building. And so I think, according to the figures that we have to be very careful about the environmental aspects and implications of dam building. Thank you.
Two more, and I think then we'll. Three more. Okay, try to be brief.
Sorry, mine is also not a question, but rather a comment. My name is Andrea. I'm from a Delphi think tank working on environmental issues. My comment is connected to the previous one. If you build a dam, it's a very complex project and has many implications on different areas. You have peatlands with big carbon stores, you have floodplains with agriculture, you have fisheries in the rivers local people depend on, and you have to hold these benefits for local people against the gains you will have economically and energy-wise from a dam project. And my point is that you need assessments to evaluate the complexity of consequences, and you need them very early on. And that's a question, like to what extent are these assessments being conducted? And then the issue I see is that we talked about sustainability standards, but if we're talking about a private investor, a private investor has no obligation to adhere to any, or very few, compared, for example, to the World Bank, which have their own environmental policy standards and guidelines they have to follow if they invest in a hydropower project, but a private investor has much fewer of these standards to adhere to. And yeah, so then the question is if a private investor will demand any of these assessments which are necessary to give a clear overview of the benefits and the costs involved in building such a dam.
Ok, merci. Je suis Oumaro de Concept No Economy. Je vais juste faire un petit commentaire parce que le projet, il semble être très gigantesque et il est important de ne pas nécessairement se pencher sur l'aspect économique, mais il est important de voir les dommages que ce projet peut causer à la population et au pays tout entier. Et ça me rappelle, par exemple, les conséquences du changement climatique que nous vivons aujourd'hui et que les pays du Sud global subissent les pires catastrophes dues au développement industriel des pays du Nord et qui sont davantage, Monsieur Loïl a parlé peut-être du produit intérieur brut que ce barrage pourrait produire pour la RDC. Et je me demande qu'est-ce que cela sert. Par exemple, les conséquences du changement climatique, les ressources, par exemple, du Nigeria, une étude a démontré que les ressources générées au Nigeria sont 83% sont dépensées pour payer les dettes. Et ces dettes, généralement, sont contractées pour les dommages causés par le changement climatique. Quand il y a une inondation, il y a des catastrophes naturelles et ils sont les moins responsables de ces événements. Et il faut voir le projet Inga 3 dont on débat aujourd'hui, ça va produire du bénéfice. Mais est-ce que ce bénéfice pour la RDC pourra couvrir les conséquences économiques que cela pourrait poser à la population? Je suis Oumarou, je travaille pour le Concept No économique. Concept No économie.
Merci beaucoup pour les présentations. J'ai une question pour Monsieur Campbell. C'est une question d'ordre vraiment pratique. J'ai bien compris votre propos sur l'hydroélectricité, sur la nécessité d'avoir l'hydrogène vert pour résoudre ce problème de réchauffement climatique. Mais la question d'ordre pratique tient à la faisabilité. Avez-vous connaissance d'un projet d'une telle envergure qui s'est déjà produit ailleurs? Parce que l'opération qui va se faire en RDC va consister à développer, vous l'avez dit vous-même, une quantité comme on n'a jamais produit dans le monde d'électricité, le transformer sur place, construire des pipelines, ensuite construire des ports et amener un bateau, mettre l'ammoniac et l'hydrogène ainsi transporté, le faire arriver jusque là où il est voulu, pas seulement en Allemagne, peut-être qu'il peut être aussi voulu ailleurs. Alors, juste, c'est faire une image. Un tel scénario, pensez-vous que ce soit possible avec tout ce que cela peut impliquer comme coût? Est-ce que d'un point de vue rentabilité, par rapport aussi à celui qui investit dans ce projet, ça peut être rentable, comme c'est présenté? On comprend bien la nécessité, on comprend bien la puissance qui est installée et ce que ça peut apporter, la valeur de l'énergie qui peut être produite et si l'hydroélectricité existe, comment ça peut durer dans le temps. Mais est-ce que cette opération-là est faisable, partant de votre expérience? Voilà, parce que nous avons entendu d'autres sons de cloche disant que ce sont des rêves, hein, des gens qui rêvent. Ce n'est pas interdit de rêver, mais que ça risque de ne pas être possible d'exécuter et de réaliser un projet d'une telle envergure. Merci.
Okay, I think in the interest of time, we do have to end the questions here. I'm sorry. One sentence. You get one sentence.
There is one remark and one question. The remark is on the governance issue. You said that the bad governance creates the problems with those large projects. It crossed my mind that maybe it's the other way around also, that these huge projects, they incentivize bad governance, corruption, and all those problems. And the other question is, how climate friendly is hydropower at all? I mean, especially in the tropics, with this huge amount of methane that is created. We saw the Congo plume at the carbon sink, which will be disrupted. So under pure climate considerations, is there a chance for these hydropower projects at all?
Okay, so I think we had a direct question to Loyal, so I will start with you, and then the others also have a chance to comment. And then we will have food.
Thank you very much for your question. I genuinely appreciate it. I think that if everything worked right, I mean, it's a huge underlying assumption to make. If everything worked right, the Grand Inga, if it was realized and appropriate industry and practices were applied and local communities benefited, and you had steel relocate their fertilizer, relocate their chemical plants, relocate their ports, open up, yeah, there would be a lot of environmental disruption. There's no doubt about that. But that would probably become one of the biggest economic zones on the African continent. Yeah, that's how much power is. Hello? You? Okay, good. Yeah, so I think that's important to clarify. You have to think that Germany is one of the most industrialized countries in the planet, and it is one of the world's largest economies with advanced manufacturing and an enormous power demand. That dam alone could provide enough power for about 80% of Germany's power demand. And this is a small region. If this energy, even a fraction of it was captured into local industry there, it would be an economic center that would reap benefits across the entire continent. There's no doubt about that. However, is that actually likely to materialize? Very unlikely. And that's because of governance. I mean, let's just say governance. I mean, that's not a thing, but like practicality of building large grid infrastructures to evacuate that much power is like, yeah, it's not, especially with the energy access issues, not a thing. The amount of roads and everything. Yeah, there's just so much, the scale of it, it's not really possible in a country that it just has that much issues of governance at every different level, the local level, the regional level, and especially the national level. If you were in a country like China where you can dictate things top down, yeah, you can get it done. But in a country like the DRC where you have political actors really making things complicated and stealing funds here and there, yeah, I really don't see it being viable in the long term. Like I think that it's a sorely missed opportunity. And I have many responses towards the idea, the notion that that dams are an archaic technology. They're the only existing form to actually and means to manage water supplies. If you have a drought or a flood, a dam is the only thing that gives you any ability to control where the water goes, whether it can flow or whether you can hold it back. So I don't think it's an archaic technology. I think it's the only thing we have to actually manage where it goes. The problem is that climate change, you have more water, more rainfall than before. So the dams that you built aren't graded for the increase in rainflow. But think about it. If you actually have more disruptive rain patterns and you don't have a dam, then you have less ability to control the water supply that is more infrequent. If you have a dam available, you can actually have reserve water that can provide you through that drought. The problem is, again, where you're building the dams is also sometimes an issue. I mean, the case that I know of is China is a frequent one, but there's lots of dams there that were built in wrong places and they weren't that great. But I mean, yeah, you're saying the environmental costs of it and the emission problems. Okay, yeah, even if you give it the benefit of the doubt and say that it releases methane emissions for 20 years, most of those dams can have the turbine ripped out without actually replacing any of the concrete and steel in the actual dam itself and be repurposed with a bigger turbine to generate more power later on. Once you build it, you can generate power from the thing for hundreds of years with very minimal investment. And that's the kind of thing that you need to recognize. Okay, cool. It might emit till 2040 if it was built tomorrow, but then to 2100, it would be more or less carbon neutral. And that's the kind of long scale things you need to think about when you're assessing hydropower. Also, it's not just in economic terms, because when you're talking in economic terms, you're directly connected to social problems and social issues, energy access. I mean, one of the biggest problems with using biomass and heating and cooking in the DRC is because you have all of these micropollutants and all of this common deforestation. If you increase electricity available, you can actually introduce clean cooking. Sorry. So many things to say. Anyways, I appreciate your question though. I'm sorry if I didn't answer it all.
Sorry to cut you off. I think people are getting hungry. Final comments? No, okay. Any final comments? But please be brief.
Yeah, peut-être quelques petites choses. Juste apprécier tout d'abord la qualité des échanges, parce que c'est très important. Il y a toutes ces questions sur les barrages, est-ce qu'ils sont bons, est-ce qu'ils sont mauvais? C'est pratique. Voilà. Donc, je disais que on apprécie énormément la qualité, n'est-ce pas, des discussions, notamment toutes les questions sur les impacts, n'est-ce pas, des barrages qui sont réels, effectivement. Et la grande problématique, moi, je note de ces questions-là, c'est est-ce que réellement nos gouvernements mettent du sérieux dans le besoin, en fait, de mener des vraies études pour démontrer les vrais impacts. Parce que quelqu'un a parlé des privés. Encore une fois de plus, sur le cas de Fortescue, pour le gouvernement congolais, il accorde le marché à Fortescue et il demande à Fortescue d'aller mobiliser les ressources pour que les ressources de Fortescue mènent les études d'impact. Qu'est-ce qu'on peut attendre de ces études d'impact menées par un acteur qui déjà engage ses ressources alors qu'il a besoin de gagner le marché et de gagner au fait dans son investissement? On peut se poser la question sur la qualité des études qui pourront venir de là. Ça, c'est une chose. Mais aussi, une autre chose, c'est que est-ce que réellement on pense aux coûts économiques que le pays devra subir effectivement, comme on le dit? Est-ce qu'on pense à ces coûts-là? Ce sont là les vraies questions qui s'opposent au fait à toutes les avances qui sont données autour, n'est-ce pas, du bénéfice que les opérateurs vont gagner, parce que finalement, même le gouvernement pourra ne pas gagner grand-chose, c'est les opérateurs et, n'est-ce pas, les acteurs individuels qui entrent en ligne de compte. Je suis totalement d'accord avec vous et c'est ça notre point de vue. On ne peut pas aller vers ces grands projets-là ou de projets qui présentent plutôt beaucoup de risques à l'aveuglette. Donc, il faut clarifier toutes ces choses et voir dans quelle mesure, voilà, on prend en considération tous les aspects, qu'ils soient économiques, environnementaux et sociaux, pour le bien, n'est-ce pas, de nos populations, pour le bien de l'environnement, le climat bien évidemment, et pour le bien de l'économie de nos pays. Merci.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you again so much to our wonderful panel. And thank you to you for coming and for your comments. A big thank you to the translators. So yeah, we have some publications on a table outside that you are free to take. Before you go to have some food, please do return your headphones and also take a feedback form. We are very interested to hear what you thought of this event. So we have some forms for that. And yeah, enjoy the food. Thank you for coming.